Hello, my name is Noah from Mensch Manufacturing. We'd like to welcome you to the Manure vacuum training video. First thing that we want to do when we get inside of the cab of the vacuum is we want to make sure that the operator is set up for viewing and operating the machine as safely as possible. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to adjust the parameters on the seat. So our lateral adjustment is here on the side of the seat, and that'll bring us closer and further from the steering column, as well as the windshield and our visibility. The second thing that we're going to adjust on the seat is the height of the seat, and that can vary with the operator. So pushing this button in is going to apply pressure in the bag and lift the seat up, and then we can decrease the height of the seat by letting that out and come down. The next thing that we want to adjust once our seat is comfortable is we're going to adjust the steering column for the operator, and we can bring that closer to, we're going to loosen this nut up, and then we can bring it closer to the operator, or we can move this further away from the operator based on where they're sitting and what's comfortable and what's convenient for the operator. And we're going to tighten that down once we get that to the position that we want when we're ready to drive. Once our steering column is adjusted, we want to go into the seat belt, and we want to make sure that our seat belt is properly fastened in case we have any issues while we're operating. And then we want to take note of our door. It is a split door, so you are able to close just the bottom half if you were to so choose. And you can lock the top half back. So you're going to want to bring that top half all the way back. You'll hear it engage, and now it's safe for operation, and you are ready to start up the machine and drive away. In order to release the top half of the door to bring it in so that you have full closure on the complete door if you were to get rain or if it's cold out, there's the release back here. We want to push that release down. That'll release the top half of the door. We're just going to pull it back in, and once it's in, we're going to lock it to the stop here, and I can show you that right here. We're just going to pull that back, and that locks that door, and that enables it to move just as one solid piece again. Now that we have the machine adjusted to us, what we want to do next is we're going to go ahead, we're going to start up the machine, and we're just going to simulate that for right now so that we don't have the engine noise. But we would take this key, we would turn it until we hear the ignition fire, we would release the key, thus turning back to the run position, and that would enable us to function all of the lights and everything else that we need to on the machine. So at this point we want to be careful. First thing that I would want to do once the machine is running is we want to make sure that our mirrors are properly adjusted. Now to do that, we're actually going to take our mirror button and we can adjust our passenger side mirror, bringing it in and out, and we're able to manually adjust our mirrors. So that way we know that we're able to see everything behind us and we can do so clearly. We're also able to look here on the front, in the front corner, and we can see our backup cameras, making sure that now we have power to the cab, that we're able to see out of those clearly, and we're able to see the area around us clearly. Parking brake, you do want the red light on, as that's going to tell us that the parking brake is engaged, the joystick is in the neutral position, the machine is safe, it's running, and we are actually ready to begin functions. So first thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that all my lights are on. So this light right here is actually our beacon in the back, our emergency strobe light. That's going to alert surrounding vehicles as well as personnel to our presence. We have our headlights are on now, as well as the lights in the back of the machine, and that's going to, at nighttime, that's going to light up all of the area around us, so that way we're able to go in reverse. We're able to make safe forward turns because our rear end is swinging, and we're also able to see the area in front of us. One thing that we do want to note, on the left hand side of the steering column here, we are able to actually turn on our bright lights, and that does add a second set of lights in the forward direction of travel. That way we're able to see a much broader range and a little bit more safely. So 9 times out of 10 we do have that on when we're running at night. Okay, so some of the safety things that we want to do when we're going to go ahead, we're going to start to drive, but I want to make sure that my park brake is still working and my seat switch is working. Those are some of the very important safety things. That joystick needs to work properly. Our parking brake needs to work properly. I need to know where that is, and I need to know that my seat switch is working properly. All these things are here for the safety of myself, the safety of those working around me, as well as the safety as the structures, the barns, and everything else that we're in. So I'm going to take my joystick, I'm going to pull up on that neutral detent because there's a locker here. I cannot push it without lifting that up. What we're going to do is we're going to actually lift up the center, the neutral lock on the joystick, and we're going to bring that backwards to make sure that we're able to hear that backup beeper, and we can hear that. We can also feel the machine pulling and hear it pulling against the brake. That tells us our brake is absolutely functional and the machine's not going to be able to drive away even if we try to tell it to while that parking brake is on. You can hear it doing that. The next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and we're going to release the parking brake. Now that we know that the joystick is back in the neutral position, the machine is safe to operate. Everything is doing only what we tell it to when we tell it to. Now the machine's not creeping, we're not rolling, so we know that there's no dysfunction in the joystick again. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to slightly just start to drive forward until we feel it take off just a little bit. We don't want to get crazy with it. And we're going to remove ourselves from the seat. And you see how the machine stopped? That means our seat switch is doing the appropriate thing. We can sit back down, the machine takes back off, and we actually bring that back to neutral, and the machine stops to move. We reapply the parking brake. This tells us that the machine is functioning properly and that all of the functions are doing what they are told to and only when they're told to do it. One of the other things that I like to get guys comfortable with prior to leaving is knowing where that park brake is. That's a big one. You know, we turned that on and off once already, but just being familiar with that. If the machine were to ever start to roll, we lose hydraulic pressure, it becomes a hazard. We need to know where that is so that we can shut the machine down, lock it up, and we can be safe for ourselves and all those around us, as well as any building structures or any other equipment. So making sure that we know where that is. We have to know where our 2- and 4-wheel steer is. Inside the cab, we have a switch here, and we also have some lights. So on the display here, you're able to see an axle centering switch. This top light indicates our front axle, and the bottom light indicates our rear axle, and they're only going to be lit up when the axles are centered. So this is when we know that we're going to proceed in a forward direction of travel without any what we call dog tracking, where maybe a rear axle is turned when it's not supposed to be. So right now you see how the light shut off. That's because I'm turning my front wheel. If I bring that back to center, I know that my wheels are in line with each other. At that point, I could turn on my 2-wheel and 4-wheel steer, and now you're going to see both of them leave. And that's because my rear and my front wheels are turning at the same time, and I can bring that back. If I were to want to go into 2-wheel steer, I'd bring the rear light on, I turn off my 4-wheel, and then now I'm able to just turn with my front again. This helps out a lot if you have a full load and you want to traverse down the road, or you're going to be going a long ways. To take it out of that 4-wheel steer is a nice safety measure that you're able to take, because you're not going to have the quick action of turning. And with a full tank of manure having a higher center of gravity, the chance of a rollover increases. So what we want to do is we want to be as safe as we can be. When we have that full load of manure, we want to make sure that we're in 2-wheel steer and we're taking out a 4. 4-wheel steer is extremely beneficial when we're inside of the barn and we're trying to traverse and navigate through tight spaces. But again, when the tank is full and we're trying to make long stretches of drive and we're doing it at higher rates of speed, we want to take it out of that 4-wheel steer and we want to put it into just 2, making sure our rear axle is centered and our front is the only one that we're navigating with. One of the things that new operators do, and it's very common, especially when we're pulling a trail device, is when we're going to take a tight corner, we'll actually hang outside of that corner and we'll take it really big and wide. The thing that you want to be thinking out with the Mensch manure vacuum is that in 4-wheel steer, and when we turn that, we're actually turning that sharp, and that rear end is going to start walking away from us. So if we take a turn wide towards the outside of that turn, that can pose a serious issue, because if we have any obstruction on that outside edge, so let's say this machine is going to turn right and they turn tight, that machine is going to want to start walking away from its current path of travel with that rear end. So what we actually like to do is we actually like to come into a corner kind of on an angle, and we like to turn and pivot around it. So we're actually going to hug that inside of the corner more than we would with a trail device, simply because as we turn, the back end of that machine goes away from us. So we want to keep that in mind. A lot of operators I see after the first week of using it do a much better job at driving this machine than I do. But that's one of the things that they have to get used to, is we're not pulling a wagon. We don't want to take it wide. We actually want to kind of stay a little bit closer or come in on a bit of an angle, and we can kind of pivot around a thing. So in the center of the axles here, we're actually able to pivot around things when we really turn hard, when that's right in the center of that. Then we got the back end walking away and the front end walking towards, and we're able to hug that a lot closer. So take your turns closer than what you think, because that back end's walking away. The other thing I like guys to remember is, just like your vehicle or an automobile, we're actually sitting on one side of there. So in the US here, we sit on the left side. In Europe, you know, in some of the countries they're on the right hand side, so that kind of varies wherever you're from. But on this machine, we're sitting on the left hand side of the machine, so making sure that you're not trying to put yourself in the center of the alley. You want to put yourself on the left side of that alley when you're in there, and that'll keep the scraper and the machine centered in the alley itself. I try to tell guys a lot of times that auger door right here, the center post of your machine, that's what needs to be centered in the alley. You want to be on the left hand side. The next thing that we're able to go through is our high and our low range. Right now, having the top light on here on the display column, the top light indicates that I am in high range. So we do high range when we're navigating primarily empty. You can at full with with great amounts of caution and driving skill. And what we typically would do is, when we're going through the barn, we want to be in low range, and if we're a full tank and we're navigating some rougher terrain, we're definitely going to want to be in low range here. Low range provides us with more torque and a little bit more control over that speed. So especially when we're in that barn and we're going to be going and we're going to be turning and we're going to be learning and we're going to be doing different things, having that greater level of control over the machine in low range is a nice thing. So in order for us to shift from high range to low range, the machine must be fully stopped, our park brake must be on, and what we're going to do is we're going to take that high and low range and we're going to click backwards on that, and we're going to shift that down. All right, when shifting the machine from high range to low range, we have to make sure that we have the ignition key. So if you don't have the ignition key, that means that the managing personnel have decided that we do not need high range, which in most cases that is often the case, that more often than not we do not need high range. But in the event that you do, in order to shift from high range to low range or from low range to high range, we need to make sure that the parking brake again is set and the machine is stopped and in the neutral position. We're going to make sure that our key is in the on position, allowing us to use the shift selector. We're going to go ahead and to shift from high to low, we're actually push on the reverse side or the back side of the switch, bringing us now to the low position. Now, in order for us to make sure that the gears have set properly and are engaged, what we want to do is we want to release the park brake switch, and then what I'm going to do is just make sure with my cameras and my mirrors that I have safe direction of travel and backwards and reverse, and I'm actually going to go in reverse very slowly, just a little bit. And what we want to do there, and I'm going to reapply the park brake now, is there's a set of gears, and we want to make sure that those gears are not tooth to tooth, and we're actually tooth to valley so that they're able to mesh. If they're tooth to tooth and we get in here, we shift from high to low or low to high, and we jam that stick forward, you can get that to strip out. And we've just shredded a gear at that point, and it makes a mess, and now there's a repair that needs to be done. In order for us to eliminate the need for that repair, after the initial selection is done, we want to go very slowly into that reverse, or you can even go into the forward direction of travel. We want to very slowly do that. That way, if it's not that slow, we'll allow that to mesh up, and then we can proceed. Once the initial mesh is done, we don't need to worry about it anymore. At this point in time, I know the gears have meshed together properly, and I'm able to just take off from this point forward until I switch again. Now, going from low to high, what I'd want to do is push on the forward side of that switch, thus giving me the high range. I can see that there. I will take off my park brake, and what again is now I can go into that forward direction of travel even just very slowly, and I want to give those gears the opportunity to mesh up. Now, once I've done that, I can put my park brake back on, and I know that those gears have locked together, and I can proceed the next time, again, without fear of any issues in that transfer case. Those are one of the important things. When we're shifting from high range to low range, we want to make sure that initial drive, after we've selected that gear, we want to make sure that we're proceeding very slowly so that we make sure that those gears are meshed properly. Another thing that we're able to do is we do have heated mirrors on the vacuum, and the heated mirrors are beneficial if you're in a very cold climate and you go into the barn. So initially entering into the barn, especially with all the animals in there, you can get a very high humidity atmosphere, and doing that can fog your mirrors almost instantly. So you're able to turn on that heated mirror switch, and that'll apply heat to the mirrors and keep them from fogging up, and it'll allow you to use them clearly without any visibility obstructions from the fog and the humidity that's in the air. All right, The next thing that we're going to go to are the actual scraping functions. So this is kind of the heart and the soul of the machine, right? The purpose that you have it. What we're able to do is with our machine is we're able to control the left arm and we're able to control the right arm independently from each other, which is essential. We're able to operate the up and the down, and we can turn off the vacuum all here with the joystick. That way, as the operator gains more and more comfort with the machine, the hand never has to leave the joystick. The hand is never far away from where it has to be in order to maintain safe control over the machine. So what we're able to do is with the left toggle switch here, when we push that forward, we're going to be moving the left arm in the outward position. So the machine is able to lock in the forward position, and we're able to actually have a spring back function on the return position. So when we're going through the alleyway, I'm able to bring out my left arm. I would do that until we're about 6 inches to a foot away from that curb. And then what we want to do is we want to stop. We're going to bring out the right arm until we're that 6 inches to a foot away from the curb. And then we're going to stop, and then we're going to bring the scraper down, and we're actually going to lock that in the down position, and that's going to hold steady force against the ground. That is a bigger deal and a more of a primary concern when we're in a heavier, thicker manure. Heavier, thicker manure tends to want to lift the scraper, causing it to not scrape well. So we want to lock that down. Once we're locked down and the skis are close to the edge, and we want to then proceed to lock those into that position. So as we're going through the barn, these 3 switches are going to be in their locked position, and that'll allow that scraper to follow and float along the floor as that floor goes up and down, and it'll allow the right arm to follow the curb and the left arm to follow the curb. Now as we get to drinkers or we get to a piece of broken concrete in the curb, let's say there's one coming up on the right side, I have the machine progressing forward, we're moving down the aisle. I'm able to, at that point, with my joystick forward and my hand still on that joystick, I can bring it out of the float position and I can bump that wing in to get it past the obstruction that's in the alleyway, and then I can lock it back out. And I can do the same thing for the left side. And in the meantime, my hand never has to leave that that control, so that I'm always in a safer operation mode. And I can bump that arm in if there was something on the left side, and then I can lock it back out into the float position. That float position is very essential because as we're going down the alley, the operator is swerving through the alley. You don't notice it, but you are, very minutely. But at this rate, when it's locked, we're always holding constant pressure on the curbs, allowing that machine to float, and it's never not doing its job as well as it could be. The other thing that we're going to do is once we get the scraper into position, we can turn on that blower. Okay, and you're going to hear it ramp up. There's an audible difference from when we're without it to with it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use our RPM ramp up, and we're going to ramp up the machine to 1800 RPM. 1800 RPM is where we vacuum typically. Once we go more than that, we have not found any greater efficiencies to the vacuum. Less than that can produce less noise. It does slow down the vacuuming process, but it's still doable. We have customers that lock it in at about 1600 RPM, and they're still able to do a great job vacuuming. They're just doing it at a slower pace with less volume. So when we're going down the alley, all 4 of these switches are going to be in the forward position like that, and then we're actually able to vacuum. Now, there are some options on vacuums. This one does not currently have it, but where we're able to actually spread with it. So if this was a spread option vacuum, pushing the toggle forward pressurizes the tank and pushes manure out, and pulling it backwards in the 3-position switch is actually going to pull manure in, and that's kind of the logic that we use there. So backwards to pull manure in for vacuum, forwards for pressure and to push it out. So again, we got the toggles here, everything's locked in, and we're able to then proceed down down the alley. Again, we want to start slow and we want to ease into that. Now when we're vacuuming down the alley, my ground speed is dictated by the manure, not how fast I want to go, but I actually have the manure tell me how fast I'm going to go. So I have my vacuum at 1800 RPMs. I have my machine in the forward direction of travel. What I'm looking at is I'm looking at that hose that's right there, and when that hose is bouncing around, that tells me I'm vacuuming manure. I have manure that's going up there, and I'm able to look at my arms that are out there. And what I want to do is I want to keep manure from the halfway point of my arms or closer. I can get it out a little ways, 3/4, not terrible. I typically like to have it about halfway that puts me in control of my situation. As soon as I have a wave of manure that progresses maybe 10 feet or 10 meters, 30 feet, right, or 5 meters out in front of me, what that does is that creates a situation I can no longer control, and manure that I'm not in control of. And I want to be in control of that manure. So my ground speed will be dictated by how far that wave or how far that manure is in front of me. If we're in this pen 3 times a day, typically I can go almost as fast as you can go in low range, which is approximately 9 miles an hour. If it's heavy manure, thick manure, or there's a lot more of it, I'm going to end up slowing down the machine, and I'm going to kind of let that manure tell me where I got to be. Now, it's very often that we see guys get that pile out in front of you. If that's what you're comfortable with, that's fine. It's not like one way is right and the other is wrong. We just typically say, hey, put it about halfway. That puts you in control. That way, when we get to the end of the alley, we're actually able to do a better job at cleaning up. And that brings us to the end of the alley. So right now we're going through the alley. We get to the end of the alley. We're going to want to slow the machine down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave my pressure down, and I'm going to bring my one arm in, and I'm going to bring it just past center. And then I'm going to bring it back out, and I'm going to bring the other arm in. And that acts sort of like a windshield wiper. And then I'm going to bring my other arm back in. And what that did is that contained all of the manure. So if I have the wave out in front of me, I can't catch it. But if I have all of the manure within the scraper head, I can actually fold it up into the scraper head. I can bring this back to the neutral position, and I'm just going to bump it once. And that takes pressure off from the vacuum. And then we're going to go backwards about 30 feet. And when I'm going backwards, I'm kind of just watching. I'm making sure that I'm going where I was. I'm not hitting anything. There's nobody behind me. And then while I'm going backwards, I'm actually able to start locking my arms back out. And once you see those arms get close, I'll actually stop the machine. I'll put pressure back down. And what we did is we took that last little bit of manure that's up against the wall, up against the gate, somewhere we can't go, and it's brought it to somewhere that we can go. And then we're going to slowly drive into that pile of manure again, and that'll enable us to get most of the manure. Typically with a standard V-style scraper, we're able to get, I would say, all but a few buckets full of manure, a few shovelfuls of manure, that we're able to pick all of it up and get it all in there. So once I again progress all the way to the point where I can't go anymore, I'll bring my joystick to neutral. I'm gonna bring my my right arm in until it stops. I'll bring my left arm in until it stops. I'm gonna bring my scraper head up. I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to bring my RPMs back down to idle, which is about 850, and then I'm going to shut my blower off. So you notice that we turn the blower on and we turn the blower off at idle, because that coupler's right there. We want to make sure that we're giving all that coupler all of the grace, all of the opportunity and the stress-free startup torque and shutdown torque that we can. So we're always going to be turning that blower on and off at an idle. And then at that point, once we're full, we've either spun around inside of the alley, or we got to back out of the alley, and then we're going to be going off to dump. While we are progressing through the alleyway, if we notice one of our full tank lights coming on here, and it'll begin blinking at first, that'll tell us that we are getting close to the capacity of the machine. We're within, I would say, about 90% of the full capacity of the machine. And that'll tell us that we need to start to think about our exit strategy. So the blinking light tells us that we're getting close. We're not all the way full yet, but we are getting close. Now, if that progresses to a steady static light, that tells us that our tank is full. Our blower actually will automatically shut off, and that tells us that it's time to leave the pen and to go dump. So you can see now that the light is on, the steady or the stagnant light. That tells us our tank is full. Our blower at this point is shut off automatically, like it should. So at that point we can shut the blower switch off, and then we need to get out of the barn, and we're going to actually go and empty at that point. As we were in the cab and we talked about the tank full, there's actually a visual indicator to allow you to know where the tank is at as well. So as the tank begins to fill up with manure, the arrow or the float in here is going to actually start to progress upwards. So once this progresses upwards, beyond that panel, you know you're getting close to where that tank full light is going to start blinking. Right about here is where that light's going to start blinking at you. So if you're going through the alley and you want to know where you're at, this thing is a visual indicator that the operator is clearly able to see out of his driver's side window, that he'll be able to tell where the level in the tank is currently at. So now that we're going to empty, Once we get close to the spot where we're going to empty, we want to make sure that we approach that spot with caution and care, because we do not want to send the machine, as it's fully loaded, it can be very heavy. We do not want to send that over the edge and into whatever we're emptying from, thus, causing operator harm and or endangering the operator and the surrounding people. So what we want to do is we want to approach it with caution. Once we get to the point where we can empty out of the front, then what we want to do is we want to bring the joystick to neutral, apply the parking brake so that the machine is safe, it is steady, it is stagnant, it cannot roll, it cannot move. Then what we're going to do is we're going to bring the machine back down to idle RPM, which is about 850 RPM. We're going to slowly open the door. We're going to use that toggle switch. The door is going to go open. We want to open the door all the way. And we want to, at that point, turn on the auger. Again, we're doing it at an idle to allow the drivetrain components for the auger minimum stress at startup. So once the auger is going, we can rev the machine up, and the machine will stop revving at 1100 RPM. No matter how many times we push it, just like with our blower, we max out at 1800 on the blower, we're going to max out at 1100 on the auger. And that's there again just to keep it from overstressing all the drivetrain components. It's very important that we turn on the auger. There's going to be a lot of head pressure for the liquid pushing the manure out. What we don't want to do is keep the auger from turning. We get a lot of new operators who think that, hey, I've opened the door, I'm emptying the tank. That's true to some extent, but if the auger is not turning, we're actually doing the opposite of what it's capable of doing. The auger is capable of emptying all the components out of the tank, even if it's heavy sand-laden manure. But we're doing the opposite if we're not turning it. We're holding that sand in, and we're going to create a problem with a lot of bridging, and at some point we're going to fill the tank up with mostly sand. We'll have to open up the side hatches and wash it out and clean it all out. And getting into the tank is a dangerous and hazardous thing. We don't want you to get in the tank. So we want to make sure that that auger is spinning every time to make sure that the components are empty. So we're going to turn that on. It usually takes about a minute, maybe a minute and a half. It depends on the size of the tank to empty all the contents out. We're going to notice the rate of manure that exits the machine slows down drastically as that tank gets empty. Once it's empty, you're going to always have a little bit coming out, but I would say at that point we're able to stop. So again, we're going to rev down from the 1100 peak. We're going to go back down to the idle. We're going to shut the auger off. We're going to close the door. And then at that point, we can make sure that it's safe to back away from whatever we just pulled up to empty, and we could traverse to the next group or to finish up the same group that we were just in if we hit that full tank sensor. Thank you for watching the Mensch Manufacturing Manure Vacuum Operator Training video.